Welcome to Whims and Whispers. If you're new here, where silence speaks and shadows remember, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this video. Every week, we bring you chilling disappearances, unsolved mysteries, and stories that linger long after the call goes quiet. Now imagine this. It's past midnight in rural Minnesota. Your car slips into a ditch. Nothing serious, just inconvenient. You call your parents. They get in the car, ready to pick you up. For nearly an hour, you stay on the phone with your father. Calm, descriptive, assured. You tell him, "I can see the lights of Lynd." You promise you're walking toward them, and then after 47 long minutes, one final word. "Oh, shh." The line stays open, but your voice never returns. That was the last anyone ever heard from 19-year-old Brandon Swanson. And in the 16 years since, not a single trace of him has ever been found. This is the haunting disappearance of Brandon Swanson, and tonight, we're walking that road with him. Brandon's last night. Brandon Swanson was the kind of young man you might pass on a college campus and not think twice about. Quiet, steady, the kind of student who preferred science fiction books and astronomy charts over wild nights out. At just 19, he had finished his first year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, studying wind energy, an emerging field he believed could shape the future. He was sharp, dependable, and by all accounts deeply loved by his family. On Wednesday, May 14th, 2008, Brandon's life was unfolding like any other small-town story. He just wrapped up his finals, and with the relief of the school year behind him, he decided to celebrate. That night, he visited friends in the nearby town of Canby, Minnesota, just a half-hour's drive from his hometown of Marshall. The gatherings weren't rowdy parties. Friends later told investigators Brandon was sober, composed, and in good spirits. He wasn't stumbling or out of control. He was, in every way, the young man his parents knew him to be: responsible, thoughtful, cautious. Sometime after midnight, Brandon got into his green Chevrolet Lumina and started the familiar drive home. It was the kind of late-night trip countless college students have made before. Dark roads, empty fields, headlights cutting across farmland under a blanket of stars. But somewhere along that route, whether by mistake, miscalculation, or something else entirely, Brandon lost his way. At 1:54 a.m., his parents' phone rang. On the other end, Brandon's calm voice. "Hey, my car's stuck." I went off the road just outside of Lynd. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't hurt. He just needed a ride. His parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, threw on clothes, grabbed their keys, and drove into the night to bring their son home. They believed it would be simple. They had no idea it would become one of the most haunting and baffling disappearances in modern history. The disappearance, 1:54 a.m. Brian and Annette Swanson's phone rang. On the line, their 19-year-old son, calm, clear. His car had slipped into a shallow ditch. He wasn't injured. He wasn't afraid. Just stuck outside the tiny town of Lynd, Minnesota. "Come pick me up," Brandon said. "I can see the lights." His parents reassured him they'd be there soon. They got into their pickup truck and began the short drive, keeping the phone line open as they searched the dark country roads. 2 a.m. to 2:15 a.m. As they drove, Brandon described his surroundings: fences, gravel roads, the glow of town lights in the distance. He told his father he was walking toward Lynd to meet them halfway. "Flash your lights," he said. They did, but he couldn't see them. "Honk your horn." They tried that too, but he couldn't hear it. Brian and Annette began to feel unease. Brandon was sure he was close, but somehow they couldn't find him. 2:15 to 2:30 a.m. The conversation continued as Brandon walked. He remained calm, never once sounding disoriented or panicked. He mentioned fences, gravel crunching underfoot, and even crossing a small stream. He repeated that he was heading straight toward the lights of Lynd, but when Brian and Annette combed every road and turned near town, there was nothing. No car, no sun, just silence outside the phone line. 2:30 to 3:10 a.m. The final call. For nearly 47 uninterrupted minutes, Brandon spoke to his father. Not frantic, almost casual at times. He even chatted about everyday things while walking. But underneath there was a tension. He truly believed he was closing in on Lynd, and yet nothing matched. Then, at 3:10 a.m., everything changed. On the line, Brian heard a pause. Then his son's final words. "Oh, shit." No scream, no struggle, no sound of splashing water or falling. Just silence. The call didn't disconnect. It remained open. Brian stayed on the line, calling his son's name again and again, hoping he would answer. But Brandon Swanson never spoke again. 3:15 a.m. and onward, Brian Swanson kept the call line open, pleading with his son's name, but there was only dead air. No footsteps, no rustling, just silence. Through the rest of the night, Brian and Annette drove up and down back roads near Lynd, headlights sweeping across gravel and fields, but there was no sign of Brandon. By dawn, with terror gnawing at their certainty, they contacted the Lynd Police Department. The response? A shrug. "He's 19, officers said. He's probably just hiding because he's embarrassed." Hours passed. The Swansons begged them to take it seriously. They insisted something was wrong. Their son had vanished mid-conversation. Yet police delayed action until later that day. By then, any trail had already begun to fade. The car. Eventually, Brandon's green Chevrolet Lumina was located. It wasn't near Lynd at all. Instead, it sat in a shallow ditch off a gravel road near Taunton, nearly 25 miles away from where Brandon thought he was. The car showed no damage, no crash, no struggle. The doors were shut, keys missing, lights off. Just a perfectly intact vehicle abandoned in the night. It wasn't until investigators checked his cell tower records that the truth came out. Brandon had been nowhere near Lynd during the entire call. He had been lost in a completely different county, walking through darkness toward lights that didn't exist. The scent trail. With volunteers now joining the search, dogs were brought in. They followed Brandon's scent away from his car for nearly 3 miles across gravel roads, through farmland and fences, past fields in the pitch dark. The trail led to the Yellow Medicine River, and there it simply stopped. Not weakened, not faded, stopped. Searchers scoured the riverbanks, fearing Brandon had fallen in. But the river that night was shallow and calm. Divers and sonar teams scoured the water. They dragged it again and again. No body, no clothing, no phone, nothing. The dogs showed hesitation at the water's edge, circling with confusion, refusing to cross. It was as if Brandon had simply ceased to exist beyond that point. The search expands. Over the following weeks, hundreds of volunteers joined the hunt. Helicopters scanned the land from above. Boats combed the river. Cadaver dogs swept fields. Farmers allowed investigators to plow through their crops. Every inch of land within a wide radius was checked. But the result was always the same. No trace of Brandon Swanson. No shoe, no wallet, no shred of clothing, no phone, no body. As if the earth itself had swallowed him. When a disappearance leaves no trace, theories multiply. In Brandon's case, each possibility seems plausible at first glance, yet everyone unravels under closer inspection. The accidental drowning theory. Authorities first believed Brandon may have fallen into the Yellow Medicine River. After all, his scent trail ended there. Maybe he slipped. Maybe the water swept him away. But problems linger. The river was shallow and calm that night, not strong enough to carry a body. Cadaver dogs and divers found nothing, despite repeated searches. His final words, "Oh shit," were not followed by splashing, thrashing, or cries for help. If Brandon drowned, the river should have surrendered something, but it never did. 2. The hypothermia theory. Another theory suggests Brandon simply succumbed to exposure. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt on a chilly May night. Perhaps he wandered into farmland, grew exhausted, and collapsed. But again, hypothermia victims often leave clothing, disturbed brush, or footprints. None were ever found. Hundreds of volunteers scoured fields within days. Planes and helicopters swept from above, yet nothing surfaced. Most chilling of all, the scent trail didn't fade with distance. It ended abruptly at the river. If Brandon had wandered further, why did the dogs refuse to follow? 3. The foul play theory. Some believe Brandon may not have been alone. His last words, "Oh sht," sound more like surprise than a stumble. Could someone have been out there with him? Theories suggest he accepted a ride from a passerby. He was ambushed while walking. The lights of Lynd he followed were not a town, but someone luring him. But there's no evidence of a struggle, no suspects, no witnesses, no surveillance. Foul play leaves fingerprints. Brandon's case left none. 4. The wildlife theory. Minnesota fields are home to coyotes and the occasional black bear. Could Brandon have been attacked? Unlikely. Animal attacks are violent, messy, and loud. Brandon was on the phone when he vanished. If claws or teeth struck, his father would have heard it. There was no scream, no struggle, no tearing of fabric, no remains. 5. The psychological theory. Could Brandon have suffered a sudden mental break? Hallucinated lights, believed he was somewhere he wasn't, lost touch with reality. But those who knew him dismissed this. He had no history of illness. He stayed calm, logical, and clear-headed throughout the call. His decision to phone for help shows rational thought. If this was a break from reality, it left no cracks, except his vanishing. 6. The missing 411 theory. Here lies the most chilling possibility. Retired Officer David Paulides documents eerie disappearances under a pattern known as Missing 411. Brandon's case checks nearly every box: disappearance near water, dogs losing the trail suddenly, calm demeanor followed by abrupt silence, body never recovered despite exhaustive searches. Some believe these cases point to a force beyond comprehension, portals, entities, or a thinning of the world's fabric. Brandon's final words, "Gone new weight here." Not as a fall, but as recognition, as if he saw something he shouldn't have. And then, silence. 7. The void. Others speak of Brandon's disappearance in simpler, darker terms, a gap in reality, a moment when someone is here 1 second and gone the next. He was on the phone. He was speaking. He was known. And still he left no trace. Not a goodbye. Not a body. Not a clue. Just a word and a silence that still stretches across 16 years. Brandon Swanson's disappearance didn't just end with unanswered questions. It reshaped laws, grief, and the way we think about vanishing itself. Brandon's Law. In the hours after Brandon vanished, his parents begged police for urgency. Instead, they were told to wait. "He's 19, officers said. He'll turn up." But he didn't. And that delay may have cost precious time. Brian and Annette Swanson refused to let it happen to anyone else. Their fight led to Brandon's Law, passed in Minnesota in 2009. The law requires police to take every missing person report seriously, regardless of age, and to begin searching immediately if there is any risk of danger. It's a lasting legacy, carved from their grief, a safeguard for other families, so they will never again hear the words, "Wait and see." Ambiguous loss. Psychologists call Brandon's case a textbook example of ambiguous loss, the kind of grief that never ends because there is no body, no certainty, no closure. His parents live with questions that echo every day. Where is he? Did he suffer? Could we have saved him? It is a wound that never heals because it never finishes. Brandon's absence is not a death, not a life, but a loop. A voice cut off mid-sentence. A haunting that endures. On Reddit forums and true crime podcasts, Brandon's name is whispered like a ghost story. The boy who vanished mid-phone call. The case that feels less like a mystery and more like a riddle carved into the dark. To some, it's proof of human error, of how easy it is to become lost, even in familiar places. To others, it's one of the clearest missing 411 cases on record, an encounter with something we don't yet understand. But beyond speculation, Brandon's story is a mirror. It shows us how fragile the ordinary really is, that you can be on the phone with someone you love and they can vanish between words. The mythology of silence. Brandon never screamed, never ran, never cried out. His silence has become its own legend. It reminds us that some hauntings don't come from spirits, but from the weight of not knowing. His story lingers in the uneasy gap between presence and absence, between voice and silence. A reminder that even in a world of GPS, satellites, and surveillance, people can still slip away, as if into another place entirely. For the Swanson family, the mystery is not folklore. It is their son, their voice cut off, their search that never ends. For the rest of us, Brandon's disappearance is a reminder of how thin the veil is between what we know and what we never will. Because some stories don't want to be solved. They want to echo. This has been Whims and Whispers. If tonight's mystery unsettled you, share it with someone who still listens to the dark. Tap subscribe so you don't miss the next shadow that speaks. And tell us in the comments, what do you think happened to Brandon Swanson? Was it a tragic misstep or something that can't be explained? Because in the end, the call never disconnected. But Brandon did. A voice that was there one moment and gone the next. No static, no goodbye. Just silence. A silence that still lingers after 16 years. Until next time, stay haunted.